The technology is designed in order to give users the ability to understand at a very fundamental level how their interests are being protected. We use like openness and transparency for this. The technology is fundamentally based on openness and transparency. Currently, I think still in relatively early days of the development of this technology and of this like wider aggregate platform. But we are making substantial progress. And one of the key elements is to not lose sight of what it is that's actually different. Like, that we are actually giving users guarantees back, credible expectations that the technology works as they believe it does. And as soon as we start losing sight of that, as soon as Web3 becomes cluttered with these Web 2.5 platforms that kind of are Web3 in name but Web 2 in nature, then we start risking that the world will not change, that we will be beholden to these trust-bound platforms and the trust-bound service providers, the princes that this technology creates. So I think, for me at least, the coming like 5-10 years is really about staying on target, developing the technologies in their fullest, and ensuring that the technology that people use is actually the technology that they believe they're using, and that they're getting the guarantees that they expect.
How does it connect then, in the sense of Ethereum, Polkadot? How do they underlay this new Web 2 system, and what's the necessary connection between these assets, people will become familiar with you, the financialization, and the actual foreseen technological application of them in the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, you know, technology is usually quite iterative. Eventually, like maybe a major sort of key piece of technology is innovated, but by and large, we learn from our past, and we, you know, as builders, we strive to create new, better things in our future. And you know, I think I kind of see a similar path. I learned a bunch when I did Ethereum, and I, you know, kind of understood better what needed to be created to make Web3 a reality. And in many respects, the lessons that I learned in those years are sort of made good with Polkadot. And I mean, one of the crucial lessons that I realized was smart contract platforms, the platforms that we sort of see a lot in the crypto market. These kind of programmable platforms, they don't really fulfill the need in order to create a truly Web3 based application, massively multi-user application platform that's capable of largely eclipsing Web 2. And when I understood this, I kind of also understood that, you know, Polkadot has to integrate, has to free itself from this cryptocurrency-centric notion. It cannot pass the interests of the dot currency onto the interests of the end user of applications on its platform in the same way that Bitcoin does and Ethereum does. And so one of the key innovations within Polkadot was to create a platform that application providers, these teams that use Polkadot, can utilize for their application without passing on knowledge of this like token, of the dot token, to their users. It would be a bit like Google passing on knowledge of Google's electricity provider onto its search users. It wouldn't make any sense. Its search users don't care where Google gets its electricity from. They care that Google gives them the search results. Well, it's kind of the same if you build an application on Ethereum at the moment. Your users have to care about owning Ether. If you build it on Polkadot, your users are divorced from the concept of dot tokens. It's only you who have to care about it as the application developer. Your users just use your application in the way that you want them to use it.
Can you guys chat a little bit around the morphing argument, right? That Polkadot, it was perhaps a security at some point potentially, but it has certainly now at this point morphed into software, right? And how do you expect regulators to kind of respond to this argument, and how have they publicly, responded to arguments like this to date?
Sure. And before I start on this, and before we start, I think it's just important to mention this is not meant to be adversarial at all to other projects. Right, there are certainly so many different paths that can be taken forward for our industry. Some people are focusing on potential new laws, right? Others, are engaging with active litigation, right, and making arguments there before a court. Right, this is just an alternative approach. We saw what was out there, and we decided to take the SEC up on its offer to come in and talk to FinHub. So I think that's just important as we go through this analysis. It's not meant to be exclusionary or saying this is the only way forward.
Agreed. And given that the regulatory space has always been, a messy space to operate in, that's why we obviously all need good counsel. I think it makes sense, right? There are going to be many paths to success here, and this, may end up being one of those, right?
Yes. Yes, definitely. So, okay. So thinking back to frankly, 2017, I'll just mention very briefly the Dow report when it came out, right? It was the SEC's first real line in the sand. And I won't go into everything that was said, obviously. It was clear from the Dow report that the SEC was saying that the Dow token itself was a security, right? And it talked about the downstream effects, et cetera, and said no matter where you launch from, if you're selling to U.S. persons for fundraising, sales of a digital asset, U.S. federal securities laws are going to matter. So just bear that in mind, right? And since then, we've seen a lot of enforcement actions. We've also seen from the Telegram case, that basically the argument that people had tried to make that something could change form through a SAFT, right? So you would sell something pursuant to an available exemption from registration, right? This piece of paper, the SAFT, and what you would deliver, even though what you sold was a security, that you would somehow in the interim build out your token, build out your blockchain and your ecosystem, and then you deliver something and it wouldn't be a security. We've seen from the Telegram case that actually doesn't work, right? The SAFT can work for a purpose, but not for that purpose. Mm-hmm. And what the Telegram court said, among other things, essentially was that you look at what happened at the time of the initial offer and sale. And the delivery of that token is not a distinct transaction from that initial offer and sale. So if you sold something, pursuant to an exemption from registration because you knew you were fundraising, for example, you need to deliver it pursuant to that same exemption from registration to the same person, and you need to comply with the requirements for that. So making sure that people are not purchasing for resale, for immediate resale, for example. They're purchasing with a view to consume, things like that. Just many, many factors that I won't go into. But we think of it as, you throw the ball up pursuant to an exemption, you catch the ball pursuant to an exemption. And so Telegram having just, the SEC having just filed suit against Telegram at the time when we began to speak with FinHub, this was really on our minds, and it was on, we believe, the regulators' minds as well. So part of what we did was say, okay, we're buying into this, right? We're before the regulators, we're buying into this. What can we do to get out of this? And the SEC has very helpfully, I will say, provided a way out. People might not necessarily like this way out, but there is a way out of being a security, even if you initially sold something as a security. And that is through its April 2019 framework that it released, which is available online. And that is the investment company analysis for digital assets. And so within that framework, it gets a lot of flack. People say, oh, almost everything is a security under this. And if I were the SEC, I'd say, yeah, that's what we're saying. That's exactly the point. But there also are 9 factors where it says, something initially sold as a security may be reassessed at a later point and may no longer be a security. So part of our process was to show, look, we're applying our facts against this framework. Mm-hmm. And look, we, in our view, have satisfied these. And part of this involved, and I think Angie may be better placed to discuss some of it, but putting in place processes, tech gurus are going to talk about the tech, not market the token, that there's going to be a limitation in the hold by the foundation and its affiliates of tokens, because as Daniel said, one of the functions is governance, right? And so there are multiple factors about that. I will just say before, I guess I hand over to Angie and Daniel about this point, in terms of reaction from the regulators, well, there hasn't been, that we've seen, a public reaction. There certainly have been speeches that maybe others may want to talk about, but what we can say is during the process, not one time did anyone ever say that this didn't work or that our analysis was wrong. And given that we hope to have long futures in the industry and in legal and in broker-dealer world and the like, and that we are licensed. These are not claims that we would make